This diagram depicts a class hierarchy which I will use to illustrate several examples of inheritance. This class hierarchy begins with the base class person. The person class represents a basic person. The person class could define fields such as the first name, middle name, last name, age, and also social security number. Methods could be defined which allow me to set and obtain values for these fields. I could also define methods which will allow me to display information about the person. Extending from the person class is the student and employee classes. The student class inherits all of the fields and methods from the person class. In turn, it adds on specific behavior for students. This could include a list of all the classes that the student has completed and also all the currently enrolled classes. It could also contain a field which will hold the accumulated amount of credits for the student. I could also define methods which will allow me to interact with these fields. I could extend from the student class to create several different types of students, such as part-time students and also full-time students. The employee class extends from the person class to define a basic employee. This employee class will act as a base class for several different types of employees. Here the employee class would inherit all the fields and methods from the person class. In addition, it would add on specific fields and methods for employees. Extending from the employee class are several different types of employees. Here I have a contractor class, hourly, and also manager class. The contractor class represents a basic contractor employee. Here I could define fields which will allow me to define the hourly rate for the contractor, and also methods which will allow me to bill the contractor. I could also have fields inside this contractor class which will contain the company of the contractor, and also methods which will allow me to 1099 the contractor as well. The hourly class extends from employee to create a basic class to represent hourly employees. Inside of the hourly class, I could have a field which will hold the hourly rate for the employee. I could also have a second field which will contain the maximum amount of hours the employee can work in a week. I could also define the overtime rate for the hourly employee. I could then define methods which allow me to interact with these fields. I could also define a method which allows me to estimate the yearly amount that I will pay this hourly employee. The manager class extends from the employee class to define a basic class to represent managers. Inside of the manager class, I could define a field which will contain a list of all of the employees that the manager resides over. I could also define methods which will allow me to add employees and also remove employees to and from the manager. Shown here is a class hierarchy of basic shapes. This class hierarchy begins with a base class shape. Extending from shape is several different types of shapes. Here I have a triangle class to represent triangles, a circle class to represent circles, and a rectangle class to represent rectangles and also squares. Inside of the triangle class, I could define a field which will contain a list of all the lengths for the sides of the triangle. I could also define a method which will allow me to get the area of the triangle. Inside of the circle class, I could define fields which will specify the size of the circle. I could also define a method which will allow me to get the area of the circle, also the circumference of the circle. The rectangle class would define a width and height field. I could also define a method which will allow me to get the area of this rectangle. Shown here is a basic class hierarchy which could be used inside of a game application. Here this class hierarchy begins with the base class character. Extending from character is the hero and villain classes. Then extending from the villain class is the monster, ape, and robot classes. This can be used to represent different types of characters inside of a game. Each one of these characters could perform different operations inside of the game. Our final example of classes would be used inside of a restaurant management application. Here I have illustrated the class hierarchy that the restaurant application would use to represent beverages. Here this class hierarchy begins with a base class beverage. Extending from the beverage class is the complementary class and also charge class. Extending from the complementary class is the water class. All these subclasses of complementary will be free beverages that will not incur a charge. All the classes extending from the charge class will be beverages which will incur a charge. Here I have two separate types of beverages which I will charge for. I have alcoholic beverages and also non-alcoholic beverages. The alcoholic class could be used to define the basic characteristics of alcoholic beverages. When a restaurant employee makes a sale for an alcoholic beverage, the application would display an alert box. The alert box would contain a message to indicate that the employee should card the purchaser of the alcoholic beverage to ensure that they are of the proper age. Extending from the charge class is the non-alcoholic class. Extending from the non-alcoholic class would be all the non-alcoholic beverages.